Welcome back to our little corner. Stories from Korea. The night has grown late, and as the streetlights outside begin to blur in the mist, I invite you to close your eyes and let your soul drift to a distant land, a place where rows of ginkgo trees paint the corners of Seoul in gold, and where wondrous stories of destiny unfold. Tonight, we will listen to a ballad of compassion and resilience in the land of kimchi, a story that shows us that even in a heartless world, human kindness remains the warmest flame to comfort lonely hearts. It is a story that begins with somber, mournful notes but ends with a sweet symphony of happiness. Tonight, we will follow a young man named Min-jun on his journey to find himself again after being broken, only to realize that when one door closes, destiny opens, a path radiant with flowers. In the last days of autumn, Seoul wore a cloak that was both chilly and damp. The air, thick with mist, seemed to make every breath more difficult and heavy than ever. In a small rented room tucked deep inside a winding alley in Gwanak district, Min-jun sat silently in the dark. The room was no more than 15 square meters, or about 5 pyong, with peeling plaster walls that gave off the musty smell of time. He lay curled up on an old mat, his eyes glued to his phone screen. The faint, desolate blue light from the device was the only thing illuminating the anguished face of a man who felt like the most pathetic failure on earth. Suddenly, a dry ping echoed in the room. A short, cold message appeared from Mina, the woman to whom Min-jun had devoted his entire heart for the past 3 years. Min-jun, let's break up. I can't wait any longer. There was no lengthy explanation, no farewell call. Their love ended with just a few words, so casual they were cruel. He tremblingly tried to call her back, but all he heard was an endless ring followed by the soulless, automated voice announcing the subscriber's phone was off. Immediately after, a photo arrived like a knife piercing his bleeding heart. In the picture, Mina was smiling radiantly, leaning against the window of a luxurious imported car. She held a glass of dark red wine, and the voice message that followed shattered his last shred of hope. He's your old department head. He promised to buy me designer bags and take me on a trip to Europe. As for you, in 3 years, you hesitated for a whole month just to buy me a single dress. I'm sorry, but a girl's youth is short. Min-jun's hand went limp, and the phone fell onto the mat with a hopeless thud. A sharp pain shot through his chest, a suffocating feeling as if someone were squeezing the very life from his heart. His 3 years of youth, all those days he'd scrimped on food and clothes, working tirelessly day and night to provide for her meals, her English classes. Was this all it amounted to? Such a naked betrayal? The loud roar of a motorcycle in the alley made the door to his room rattle. But Min-jun was in no state to care. All he could see was Mina's face, her smile filled with contempt and scorn. The man who had stolen his love was none other than Park Hyuk-soo, the same former boss who had framed and fired him 2 weeks ago to steal his year-end bonus. He had everything: money, power, a fancy car, and a beautiful house. And what was he now? A poor graduate from the countryside, empty-handed and alone. The rage that had been suppressed for so long erupted violently. Min-jun grabbed the old phone and hurled it against the opposite wall. A loud crash echoed as it shattered, pieces flying across the floor, the screen going dark like his own bleak future. He buried his face in his knees, silent in the darkness. It felt as if his tears had already run dry during all those years of exhausting work, dreaming of a small home with Mina. That night, he sat motionless, like a stone statue. He thought of his parents back in his hometown, who had toiled their entire lives yet always proudly boasted to the whole village that their son was working in the glamorous city of Seoul. He thought of himself at 27, with no career, no love, and no money. The next morning, as the first faint rays of a new day crept through the window, Min-jun finally stood up. He told himself he couldn't just waste away in this humiliation. Even if just for 1 day, he had to leave this city of lies to find some peace for his soul. He had exactly 20,000 won left in his wallet, enough for a bus ticket and a few cups of instant noodles. He stuffed a few changes of clothes and a pair of old, worn-out sneakers into his backpack and left in silence. Min-jun decided to head to the majestic Bukhan mountain. Perhaps there, amidst the vast green wilderness, he could pour out all his frustrations to the clouds and the wind, screaming without worrying about anyone's glances or judgments. The crowded number 704 bus carried him away from the glittering glass buildings that had never had a place for him. Sitting in the last row, Minjun leaned his head against the window, watching the glamorous city gradually recede behind him. The bus stopped at the final station, and Minjun began his ascent. He didn't choose the cable car or shuttle bus. Instead, he decided to walk from the base of the mountain. He wanted to punish his body, hoping the exhaustion in his muscles and the pain in his feet would help him forget the torment in his soul. He climbed like a madman, sweat pouring off him in sheets, drenching his shirt and stinging his eyes. When he reached Begunde Peak, a sea of white clouds blanketed everything in sight. The mountain wind was as sharp as a knife, but his heart burned like fire. He wanted to look up at the sky and curse his unjust fate, but his throat tightened, and no words would come out. Only the silence of the mountain enveloped him. As the sun set, dark clouds gathered from nowhere, covering the sky. The already gloomy forest grew deeper and more frightening. The wind began to howl through the leaves, signaling an impending forest rain. Minjun hurried down the mountain. To avoid the crowded paved road, he turned onto a small, less-traveled trail, shaded by gnarled old trees. The path was a rugged, red dirt trail with tangled tree roots that looked like giant snakes beneath his feet. After about 2 kilometers, a strange sound reached his ears, a faint moan mixed with the rustling of leaves. Minjun stopped, squinting towards a thicket by the path. Underneath a large oak tree, he saw a young woman sitting on the ground. She was wearing expensive, professional hiking gear, but looked utterly miserable. A large tear in her designer jacket revealed pale skin and a bleeding scratch. Her long hair, tied in a high ponytail, was soaked with sweat and matted messily to her forehead. The woman was clutching her right ankle, her face contorted in pain. Hearing Minjun's footsteps, she looked up, startled, her eyes filled with caution and fear. "Who are you?" Her voice was sharp, and despite her pain, it carried an air of aloof pride. Minjun quickly raised his hands to show he meant no harm. "Don't be afraid. I'm just a hiker passing by. I heard a noise and came to check. It looks like you're hurt." The woman hesitated for a moment before letting go of her swollen and bruised ankle. "I slipped on that slope over there and fell. I think I twisted my ankle. I can't stand up." Her tone had softened slightly, but she still maintained an invisible distance. It was about to rain, and leaving an injured woman alone in the deep forest was too dangerous. Without hesitation, Minjun put down his backpack, took out his water bottle, and the spare medical tape he carried. "Let me take a look." He knelt on one knee, carefully lifting her injured foot. Her small, fair foot was a stark contrast to his own rough, calloused hands. "This might hurt a little. We need to temporarily immobilize the joint." A faint crack was heard, and the girl bit her lip hard to keep from crying out. Minjun tore off the bandana from his neck and wrapped it tightly around her ankle to reduce the swelling. Just then, the first raindrops began to patter on the leaves. A cold wind blew past, and Minjun noticed the girl shivering slightly in her torn jacket. Without a second thought, he took off his own old, faded denim jacket. "Here, wear this for now. Your jacket is torn, and it's easy to catch a cold in the mountains." The girl looked at the old jacket in his hands, then directly into his eyes. A flicker of surprise and emotion crossed her dark, clear eyes. She took the jacket, pulled the collar tight, and said softly, "Thank you." The rain grew heavier, and the forest was plunged into darkness in an instant. "We can't stay here. The path will get slippery when it rains. Can you walk?" The girl tried to stand, but as soon as she put weight on her injured leg, she staggered and nearly fell. Minjun quickly caught her. "That won't work. Let me carry you." She looked at his thin frame with a doubtful expression. "Carry me? It's still a long way. Are you sure you'll be okay?" Minjun gave her a reassuring smile. "Don't worry. I'm used to heavy work. I'll be fine. Get on, before the rain gets worse." He turned his back, lowering himself to wait. The woman hesitated for a moment, then her soft arms slowly wrapped around Minjun's neck, letting her body rest against his thin back. The path down the mountain, shrouded in a blinding rain, was now a truly arduous challenge. The rain poured down from above, turning the red dirt trail into slippery, muddy puddles. Minjun had to tense every toe in his canvas shoes to keep from falling, taking each step with extreme caution. Although the woman's weight on his back was not significant, the long and treacherous path made his legs begin to tremble. His breathing grew ragged, his chest burned like fire, and sweat mixed with rainwater streamed down his face. On dangerously steep sections, He had to use one hand to grip the gnarled tree roots to slowly lower himself down. The girl on his back seemed to sense his struggle. She silently gripped his shoulders, occasionally using the hem of her shirt to gently wipe away the raindrops gathering on Minjun's forehead. "What's your name?" Amidst the downpour, her voice suddenly rang out by his ear. "I'm Kim Minjun, and I'm Lee So-yeon." That brief conversation ended in silence, and the two continued to support each other through the dark night. After over an hour of battling the harsh weather, they finally saw the faint yellow lights of the parking lot appear at the foot of the mountain. Minjun let out a long sigh of relief. Though his limbs were exhausted, his heart felt strangely light. As soon as they reached the lot, a middle-aged man in a black suit rushed over, shielding them with a large umbrella. Behind him was a glossy black Genesis G90, looking luxurious and out of place among the old buses in the lot. "Oh my goodness. Vice Director, are you all right? I told you not to take that trail." The driver frantically helped So-yeon off Minjun's back. She had to lean on the driver's arm to stand steady. So-yeon gently brushed the dirt from his denim jacket before carefully taking it off and returning it. "Thank you, Mr. Minjun. If it weren't for you, I would have been stuck on the mountain tonight." Minjun took the jacket, slinging it over his shoulder, and gave an awkward smile. "It's nothing. It's only natural to help someone in trouble. You should go. You need to get that leg to a hospital immediately." So-yeon gave a slight nod, and the driver quickly pulled a thick wad of cash from his pocket, all 50,000 won bills, and tried to hand it to him. Minjun looked at the money, then at So-yeon, and the pride of a poor man suddenly surged within him. He took a step back, waving his hand dismissively. "I didn't help you for money. Please, don't do this." So-yeon paused for a moment. The look in her eyes completely changed. She told the driver to put the money away, then slowly took out an elegant black business card. On it, only the name Lee So-yeon was engraved in gold foil, along with a phone number. "My apologies if I was rude. This is my personal card. If you ever need any help, please contact me. I don't like being indebted to anyone." Minjun hesitated before taking it, stuffing it into his drenched pocket, and stumbling towards the bus stop in the pouring rain. He was completely unaware that, behind him, So-yeon's eyes quietly followed his figure until he completely vanished into the curtain of rain. 3 days after that trip, Minjun was still bedridden in his small rented room, suffering from a severe cold after being soaked in the rain for so long. He had spent his last 20,000 won, and now only had a few loose coins in his pocket. He could only drink water to stave off the hunger, his heart heavy with worry as his rent was due, and he still had no job prospects. Just then, the old flip phone he'd borrowed from his landlady rang. It was a very nice number, ending in 888. "Hello. May I ask if this is Mr. Kim Minjun's number?" a sweet female voice asked. "Yes, this is he," Minjun answered, his voice hoarse from his illness. "Hello. I'm calling from the Human Resources Department of So-yeon Group. We saw your resume online and would like to invite you for an interview for a sales position tomorrow at 9 a.m. at our headquarters." Minjun was stunned into silence. So-yeon was one of the leading corporations, with an extremely rigorous hiring process. He couldn't believe he'd received such a precious opportunity without even passing the initial screening. "Yes, I'll definitely be there. Thank you." It felt as if his fever had completely vanished. He knew this was the one chance he had to seize. The next morning, Minjun woke up at 5. He dug out his only suit from his graduation. The white shirt had yellowed. The trousers were a bit short, but he had carefully polished his old, worn-out leather shoes. Standing in front of the mirror, he tried to smooth out every wrinkle, knowing full well how rustic he looked compared to the glamour of a large corporation. The So-yeon Tower stood tall against the blue sky, sparkling in the sunlight. Stepping into the grand lobby, he felt as small as an ant. He was surrounded by stylish, confident young people. In the waiting room, Minjun retreated to a corner, enduring the whispers and jeers about his outdated suit. He lowered his head, clenching his fists, and telling himself to stay calm. "Mr. Kim Minjun, please come into interview room number 1. Minjun took a deep breath and opened the door. The room was spacious and cool. There were 3 interviewers at a long table, but his eyes were immediately drawn to the woman sitting in the center. She wore an elegant white suit, her hair in a stylish high bun, exuding an air of authority. When she looked up, Minjun's heart felt like it stopped. It was So-yeon, the woman he had carried on his back in the mud-splattered forest rain. She wasn't just a lost hiker. She was the legendary executive vice director of this corporation. So-yeon looked at him, her dark eyes widening in surprise before a meaningful smile appeared. "Mr. Kim Min-jun, we meet again." Her voice was authoritative yet full of amusement. She closed his resume folder, rested her chin on her hand, and looked him up and down. "Whether on a mountain or here, you're still loyal to the classic style, I see. Where's that denim jacket from the other day?" Min-jun froze, stammering that he was washing it. So-yeon's light chuckle eased some of the tension in the air. "This candidate doesn't need any further interviews," So-yeon said decisively to the head of HR. Min-jun's heart sank. He thought he was being dismissed for his pathetic appearance. But then her voice rang out clearly. "He's not suitable for the sales position. Process his recruitment immediately. His title will be Special Assistant to the Vice Director. Starting salary is 50 million won a year, with a separate bonus." The entire room fell silent in astonishment. The HR manager stammered a protest but was cut off by So-yeon's sharp gaze. Min-jun stood there dumbfounded. A salary of 50 million won, 10 times more than his previous company. Was this a dream? So-yeon walked closer to him, a faint scent of high-end perfume in the air, and she whispered, "Don't celebrate just yet. Earning money as my assistant won't be that easy." News of the poor country boy being hired directly as a special assistant spread like wildfire. While getting his employee ID card, Min-jun had to endure hundreds of envious and disdainful stares. But he ignored it all. He understood that he had no family background, but he had his pride and sincerity to prove that he was worthy of the lifeline So-yeon had given him. Min-jun gently asked So-yeon if she was giving him a chance to get revenge. She shook her head, replying softly that revenge was actually a secondary matter. The most important lesson she wanted him to learn was the first rule of business. A person's greatest enemy isn't a competitor, but the fear hidden deep inside oneself. She advised him that once he had the truth in his hands, he didn't need to fear anyone, not even the one who had once pushed him into the dark mud. So-yeon's words flowed into Min-jun's mind like a cool stream, serving as a wake-up call. He realized he was no longer the weak young man of yesterday. Now, he had the truth, a strong ally by his side, and most importantly, he had his self-respect to reclaim. At exactly 2 p.m., the executive conference room of So-yeon Group was brightly lit under luxurious crystal chandeliers. On the glossy oak oval table, bottles of pure mineral water and fresh flowers were neatly arranged, creating an atmosphere that was both formal and intense. The delegation from Daemyeong Trading Corporation entered, led by Park Hyuk-soo. He wore an expensive navy blue suit, his hair was slicked back, and his shiny Italian shoes clicked on the marble floor. Following him were 2 secretaries and a few technical staff members with confident expressions. The moment he saw Min-jun standing next to So-yeon's chair, Park Hyuk-soo stopped for a second, his eyes wide with utter surprise. However, he quickly regained his usual arrogance and flashed a scornful smirk. He deliberately spoke loudly for everyone to hear. "Well, who do we have here? If it isn't the country bumpkin Kim Min-jun? Don't tell me you got a janitor job here?" Though his face burned from the mocking words, Min-jun lightly touched the stack of documents on the table. The cool sensation of the paper helped him regain his composure. He looked his opponent straight in the eye and replied in a clear, polite, but extremely distant tone. "Hello, Manager Park. I am Kim Min-jun, Special Assistant to Vice Director Lee So-yeon. It's an honor to welcome you." Hyuk-soo burst out laughing. He slapped Min-jun's shoulder rudely and turned to mock So-yeon about her company's hiring process. So-yeon, who had been observing silently until now, slowly raised her head. Her gaze, sharp as a knife, was fixed on Hyuk-soo, and her ice-cold voice rang out. "Manager Park, this is a boardroom, not a marketplace. Please have a seat. Let's get straight to the point." The meeting began in a tense atmosphere. Park Hyuk-soo rambled on and on about the advanced technologies Daemyeong offered, painting a bright future for the project with hypocritical words. When he finished his grand presentation, the entire room fell silent. So-yeon gave Min-jun a slight nod. He stood up, connected his laptop to the projector, and cut off Hyuk-soo's flashy images. Min-jun began to question the origin of the X200 sensor that Daemyeong had presented. When Hyuk-soo tried to dodge the question by claiming it was an in-house product, Min-jun immediately displayed 2 images side by side on the screen. One was Dae Myung's product, the other was a cheap product from a Chinese website. They were identical, like 2 drops of water, from the outer casing to every single connection port. Despite Hyuk-soo's stubborn attempts to argue his way out, Min-jun continued to reveal the photos his friend Jin-soo had secretly taken at Dae Myung's warehouse, just 30 minutes earlier. The boxes, covered in Chinese characters, and the scene of workers peeling off old labels to apply Made in Korea stickers were so clear you could even see the beads of sweat on the workers' foreheads. The meeting room erupted in commotion, Park Hyuk-soo's face flushing red and then turning pale with humiliation. Min-jun declared in a sharp voice, importing cheap, questionable goods, and then reselling them at exorbitant prices. That is what's truly despicable and fraudulent. Manager Park. He threw the analysis report onto the table, the dry sound echoing like a slap across the liar's face. Seo-yeon stood up, announced the complete cancellation of their partnership, and stated that she would be putting Dae Myung on the Business Association's blacklist. After Park Hyuk-soo was escorted out by security in utter disgrace, the entire meeting room erupted in a round of applause for Min-jun. Seo-yeon walked over to him, flashing a rare, radiant smile. "You did well, Min-jun," he smiled back, feeling that his honor had finally been successfully defended. A few days later, while Min-jun was on his lunch break at the office, his phone suddenly rang. It was Mina's number. Although his feelings for her had long gone cold, he decided to answer to see what she wanted. Mina's voice, choked with sobs, came through the phone, begging him to meet because it was a matter of life and death. At the old coffee shop tucked away in a quiet little alley, Mina sat in a hidden corner, her eyes swollen from crying. She told him that her mother back home was suffering from a severe heart condition and urgently needed 30 million won for surgery, but she had no idea where to get the money. Mina pleaded for Min-jun's help, bringing up their past relationship and suggesting that his assistant's salary must be quite high now. Min-jun looked at the girl before him, feeling a pang of pity for her deceit. He knew very well that her mother was still perfectly healthy back home. He bluntly exposed her lie, asking if the money was actually to pay off credit card debt or her brother's gambling debts. Seeing that she could no longer keep up the act, Mina's shameless and malicious true colors were revealed. She demanded he give her the money as a sort of breakup fee, even threatening to spread malicious rumors to ruin his career at the corporation. Min-jun stood up, looking at Mina with pity. "I don't owe you a single thing. Whatever your problems are, you solve them yourself." He walked out of the cafe, leaving behind the desperate screams and threats of his ex, his heart feeling as light as if he had just shed a heavy burden from the past. Min-jun looked at Mina with eyes full of pity, a wave of melancholy washing over him for the girl who had once been his entire youth. He gently advised her to wake up, because in the eyes of a schemer like Park Hyuk-soo, she was just a toy for him to satisfy his jealousy, and she would be discarded once her beauty faded. With that, he turned and walked away, leaving Mina's hopeless threats behind him. Just as he stepped out of the coffee shop, a familiar figure caught his eye. A luxurious Genesis was parked quietly on the side of the road, and behind the lowering window was the elegant face of Seo-yeon. Even though she wore sunglasses that hid her eyes, Min-jun could still feel the concerned gaze she had for him. "Get in," she said, her voice brief but full of warmth. In the quiet interior of the car, Seo-yeon gently took off her sunglasses, her eyes both stern and filled with satisfaction. She held out a check, wanting to advance him 3 months' salary to handle his family matters, as she didn't want her employees to be distracted from work by personal issues. Min-jun looked at the check, his heart swelling with deep gratitude. He gently pushed her hand away, explaining that Mina had lied about her mother's illness to swindle money from him. Seo-yeon nodded slightly, a clear look of respect for his integrity in her eyes. But she didn't forget to warn him to be extremely cautious of people who have been pushed into a corner. Seo-yeon's warning was not misplaced at all. Just 2 days later, a storm of filth began to descend upon Min-jun's life. First came the anonymous, threatening messages that continuously bombarded his phone with crude language. Then, a malicious post appeared on social media, falsely accusing him of embezzling company funds and having an illicit relationship with his female boss. Cunningly photoshopped pictures smeared the honor of both him and Seo-yeon with the most venomous and insulting words. Faced with these insults, Min-jun trembled with rage, but Seo-yeon remained unusually calm. She gently closed his laptop and advised him that trying to explain now would only give the culprit more satisfaction. She told him that silence is golden, but action is truly diamond. In the midst of the tense atmosphere, Minjun's phone rang with an urgent call from Jinsu. His friend informed him of a suspicious package that had just been sent to his delivery company's address, wrapped in layers of tape by a hidden figure. Minjun rushed to retrieve the package from Jinsu and took it to the security room to be checked with a specialized scanner. Through the X-ray screen, a USB drive and a stack of documents were visible inside. Suspecting foul play, Minjun asked the technical department to examine the USB in a secure, isolated environment. The moment the file was opened, the antivirus program blared, warning of the presence of ransomware, an extremely powerful type of malware that encrypts data for ransom. If he had carelessly plugged it into the main system, the corporation's entire data would have been wiped out in just 5 minutes, causing billions of won in damages. Accompanying it were contracts with Minjun's forged signature, intended to frame him for accepting bribes. Seeing Park Hyuk-soo's ruthlessness, Minjun clenched his fists so tightly that the veins bulged. He decided he would not tolerate it any longer. In a quiet, soundproof meeting room, Minjun, along with the legal and security teams, began to plan a counterattack under Seo-yeon's direction. The crucial clue once again came from Jinsu, who remembered that the person who dropped off the package had gotten out of a red Mazda with a distinctive scratch on the driver's side door. After just 2 hours, the security camera footage from the coffee shop in Jongno was sent over. Although the mastermind wore a mask and a loose-fitting jacket, his distinctive walk and the glittering, limited edition, gold-plated Rolex watch on his wrist exposed Park Hyuk-soo's identity. All the evidence was there to call in the economic crime investigation team. Seo-yeon turned to look at Minjun with a determined gaze, preparing for the final counterattack at tomorrow's press conference. Seo-yeon quietly flipped through the final pages of the plan for tomorrow's press conference, announcing the Smart Industrial Park project. She decided to invite Park Hyuk-soo to attend, so he could witness all his schemes crumble with his own eyes. In response to Minjun's concern about whether the cunning man would dare to show his face, she gave a subtle, meaningful smile. With his arrogant and competitive nature, he would certainly come to gloat over the sight of Minjun being disciplined for the ransomware plot he was so confident had succeeded perfectly. It was a bold and risky plan, but Minjun chose to trust her and the fairness of life completely. The next morning, the grand hall of a 5-star hotel was packed with journalists and partners in a formal atmosphere. As predicted, Park Hyuk-soo appeared, full of pride, with Mina on his arm. They both wore splendid outfits, glowing as if they were walking the red carpet at a film awards ceremony. When she saw Minjun standing quietly behind the stage, Mina shot him a look of contempt and triumph, certain that this would be his last day at the corporation. The press conference began with a sense of solemnity. Seo-yeon stepped up to the podium, her presence both elegant and imbued with a quiet authority. After introducing the brilliant potential of the project, she suddenly changed her tone, her voice becoming sharper as she mentioned an unfortunate incident, that an unscrupulous competitor had attempted to destroy the corporation's system with ransomware. A stir went through the hall, while Park Hyuk-soo, sitting below, smirked smugly, thinking the project would have to be postponed due to data loss. But then, Seo-yeon's voice rang out decisively, announcing that thanks to the ingenious response of assistant manager Kim Minjun, the plot had been thwarted and the culprit had been dragged into the light. The large screen lit up, playing the clear CCTV footage from the coffee shop. The entire scene of Park Hyuk-soo getting out of the car, handing the package and shoving money to a stranger, along with the glittering Rolex on his wrist, appeared in plain sight. The smile vanished from Hyuk-soo's lips, his face turning deathly pale, while Mina trembled, dropping the glass in her hand. As the naked truth was exposed, the doors to the hall swung open, and 3 police officers headed towards Park Hyuk-soo to place him under emergency arrest for distributing malicious software and attempted extortion. He struggled in vain, his screams echoing through the hall amidst dozens of camera flashes capturing the humiliating moment of a once promising man. Mina tried to slip away but was recognized and surrounded by reporters in disgrace, forced to pay the price for what she had done. Standing on the stage, watching his enemy being led away, Minjun didn't feel the satisfaction he had imagined. He only felt a deep sense of relief, as if a heavy stone that had been weighing him down for so long had finally been lifted. Seo-yeon gently patted his shoulder in a comforting gesture. "It's over now, isn't it?" He smiled in return, thinking the storm had passed, but he was mistaken. The battle with Hyuk-soo was merely the prelude. A true storm within the Lee family clan was only just beginning to brew. Just as the press conference ended, a phone call made Seo-yeon's face drain of color. The phone in her hand slipped and shattered on the floor. Her father had suffered a cerebral hemorrhage and was in critical condition in the emergency room. In an instant, the Iron Lady became fragile, her eyes wild with fear. Min-jun quickly steadied her, and they rushed to the hospital together. In the hospital corridor, thick with the smell of antiseptic, she collapsed upon hearing the doctor announce that her father was in a deep coma and the family should prepare for the worst. In that moment of grief, Kang Moo, the second largest shareholder and her father's constant rival, appeared with a group of men in black suits. With a cunning glint hidden behind feigned words of concern, he announced that the board of directors had agreed to let him temporarily take over the company during the chairman's absence. This was clearly a coup, aimed at seizing power and her family's passion project. Although Seo-yeon protested vehemently, Kang Moo coldly turned away, leaving her in despair. Tomorrow was the deadline to submit the bid proposal, but without the signature of the comatose chairman, all their hard work would be for nothing. Min-jun gripped her hand, trying to transfer his own steadfastness to her. Don't give up. There's still a chance. He decided he would submit the bid proposal for her that very afternoon, before Kang Moo could intervene. Though hesitant, So-yeon finally handed him the keys to the office with a voice full of worry. Min-jun quietly returned to the corporate tower. The main lobby was filled with Kang Moo's unfamiliar security guards, forcing him to sneak in through a delivery entrance and a foul-smelling service elevator. Reaching the 68th floor, he carefully retrieved the important documents and the company seal from Seo-yeon's safe. When the footsteps of a search party echoed in the hallway, Min-jun quickly climbed through a ventilation window onto the windswept rooftop. From above, he saw the company's grandeur and knew it was his only chance of escape. The moment he started the car in the garage, the guards spotted him, and a breathtaking chase began. 2 pickup trucks and 3 motorcycles tailed him closely, deliberately ramming his vehicle to force him off the road. Amidst the gridlocked rush-hour traffic of Seoul, Min-jun had to use all his driving skills to swerve into a narrow alley in Sillim-dong, a shortcut only the locals knew. Even as the motorcyclists pursued him, shattering his rearview mirror and injuring his hand, Min-jun gritted his teeth and pushed on. Facing a congested red light at an intersection, he made a desperate move, steering into oncoming traffic to shake his pursuers. The clock showed 3:45. He had only a brief 15 minutes before the submission deadline. Ahead, the Ministry of Planning and Finance building came into view. Min-jun slammed on the brakes at the main gate, carrying her last hope on his shoulders. With the crucial file in hand, Min-jun summoned his last bit of strength and ran into the Ministry of Planning and Finance building. His entire body was drenched in sweat. His hand was still bleeding from the chase, and his clothes were disheveled and faded from the wind and dust. He shouted breathlessly when he saw the receiving clerk preparing to close her window, pleading that he was there to submit a bid for the industrial park project. The clerk was startled by the young man's tattered appearance but politely took the documents. She glanced up at the clock on the wall and smiled, saying, "It's 3:58 now. You are incredibly lucky. In another 2 minutes, we would have been closed." The thump of the official stamp on the documents echoed in the quiet space, sounding as sacred as a hymn of salvation. Min-jun let out a sigh of relief, leaned his back against the cold stone wall, and slowly slid to the floor, a radiant smile on his face, like someone who had just returned from the dead. He immediately called Seo-yeon to share the good news. On the other end, her voice trembled with emotion as she endlessly thanked her dedicated assistant. Min-jun knew he had won the race against time, but he also understood all too well that the real life-or-death battle to protect Seo-yeon and her father's power and lives would begin tomorrow, in the hospital and the boardroom. To confront Director Kang's faction, Seo-yeon needed a massive source of capital to prove her overwhelming financial capability. At precisely 8 o'clock that evening, Min-jun quietly drove Seo-yeon to a vegetarian restaurant tucked away in a small alley near Myeongdong Cathedral, a tranquil place completely separated from the noisy city. She whispered to him that the person they were about to meet was Chairman Yoon, a Korean-American billionaire and an old comrade of her father's, with whom he had long lost contact. He was known for being incredibly demanding, only investing in things he absolutely believed in. Entering the private room, they met a man in his 60s with a full head of white hair, but whose eyes were still incredibly bright and sharp. Seo-yeon bowed respectfully to Chairman Yoon, but he just quietly set down his teacup, studying her with a scrutinizing gaze. He said he was very sorry about Chairman Lee Pung's condition, but as a businessman, he did not invest based on sentiment. He demanded that Seo-yeon give him a convincing reason to believe that a young woman like her could handle such an important project. Although Seo-yeon presented her strategic vision with great passion, Chairman Yoon's expression remained impassive. He bluntly cut her off, expressing his concern about the corporation's security following a recent hacking incident. Seeing Seo-yeon at an impasse, Min-jun decided to step forward. He confidently introduced himself as her assistant and began to display a diagram of a new security architecture that he and the technical team had stayed up all night to complete. In fluent business English, Min-jun gave an in-depth analysis of the multi-layered encryption system and artificial intelligence monitoring the corporation would implement. Min-jun's confidence and concrete data completely won over the demanding billionaire. Chairman Yoon let out a hearty laugh, praising Min-jun for having the same spirit as her father in his youth, both decisive and loyal. He definitively declared he would invest $50 million in the project, not just because of their old friendship, but because of the fire burning in the eyes of the two young people. Tears welled up in Seo-yeon's eyes as she bowed her head in gratitude for the precious glimmer of hope that had just appeared. However, that joy did not last long. When they returned to the hospital, a heavy air of tragedy filled the corridor. Min-no, Seo-yeon's younger brother, ran towards them with a tear-streaked face, telling them that their father's heart had stopped. Seo-yeon desperately rushed to the door of the intensive care unit, but was held back by nurses who were attempting resuscitation with a defibrillator. Min-jun had to use all his strength to hold her and calm her, advising her to stay strong to be the pillar for her family and the company. He also didn't forget to comfort Min-no, teaching the boy that he had to be stronger in this difficult time. After an hour that felt like an eternity, the doctor emerged and announced that Chairman Lee Pung's heartbeat had returned, but his condition remained extremely critical. At that moment, Seo-yeon's phone rang with the news that Director Kang had called an emergency board meeting for 8 o'clock the next morning to have her removed. Facing the cruelty of these opportunists, Seo-yeon seemed exhausted and ready to give up. Min-jun knelt before her, his determined gaze locked on hers. He encouraged her not to fall, to stay and take care of her father while he went to the company to handle the storm in her place. She looked at him with wavering but trusting eyes, then slowly unpinned the executive badge from her suit jacket and fastened it to his chest, placing the entire fate of the corporation in Min-jun's hands. At exactly 8 o'clock the next morning, the boardroom was as cold as an ice cave. Director Kang sat in the chairman's seat with a triumphant look on his face, believing Seo-yeon had admitted defeat. However, the boardroom doors suddenly burst open. Min-jun walked in with a commanding presence, the badge of power gleaming on his chest. He loudly declared that he was Seo-yeon's legal representative, placing a power of attorney with a red seal on the table, causing a stir throughout the room. Ignoring Director Kang's insults, Min-jun calmly presented the $50 million investment agreement from Chairman Yoon. He exposed Kang's lies about a financial crisis and affirmed that the corporation was more than capable of continuing the project. Money was the measure of power, and the appearance of this huge capital injection made the shareholders look at Director Kang in a completely new light. Seeing his panic, Min-jun coolly suggested the shareholders call Chairman Yoon's office themselves to confirm the contract's authenticity. In the tense atmosphere of the boardroom, Min-jun took a deep breath and announced he would now reveal another important document. On the large screen, irrefutable evidence appeared, exposing the true face of CEO Kang Moo. He had secretly leaked internal information to a competitor to drive down the stock price, hoping to acquire the company for a pittance. This was the precious data Min-jun and his technical team had quietly recovered from the previous malware attack. To everyone's astonishment, he directly accused him of a serious breach of the corporate charter and proposed revoking his board membership and turning him over to the authorities for investigation. Director Kang Moo slammed his hand on the table and shot to his feet, his face flushed with anger and humiliation, roaring that it was all slander and fabrication. The meeting room instantly descended into chaos as shareholders split into two factions, arguing fiercely. Although the official dismissal was postponed for legal verification, his scheme to take the chairman's seat had completely gone up in smoke against the opposition from Minjun's supporters. As an enraged Kang Mu left with a threatening glare, Minjun could finally let out a sigh of relief, though he knew this battle still had dangerous undercurrents. Late into the night, Minjun rushed back to the hospital, where the hallways were silent, save for the steady hum of machines. He found Soyeon huddled on a stone bench in the courtyard, her eyes staring blankly into the pitch-black void, looking so small and lonely. He quietly sat down beside her, handing her the bread and carton of milk he had just bought, gently urging her to eat something after such an exhausting day. In the warmth of that shared moment, Soyeon gently rested her head on his shoulder, shedding the tough facade of a CEO to become a vulnerable woman once more. She softly confided that she had never really wanted to enter the business world. Her childhood dream had been to become a painter, to capture mountains and freedom on canvas. Minjun smiled, recalling the image of her on the mountain, using a branch to sketch an azalea on the ground, a drawing so vivid and elegant. The conversation between them grew warmer with his promise that, once everything settled down, he would be the first model for her paintings. However, a harsh reality came crashing down when the lawyer announced that Director Kang was preparing a lawsuit to freeze Chairman Lee Pung's assets on the grounds that he was incapacitated. If the chairman didn't wake up by morning to sign the power of attorney, Soyeon would lose all management rights. Standing before the glass of the intensive care unit, she desperately called out to her father, amidst the fragile green lines flickering on the monitor. At exactly 6 a.m, while the Seoul sky was still a dreary gray, Director Kang arrived with his lawyer and henchmen to apply pressure. Minjun resolutely protected her, not hesitating to throw a punch at those who tried to roughly shove Soyeon out of the hospital room. In the midst of the chaos, a miracle happened. Alarms blared urgently, and Chairman Lee Pung slowly opened his eyes. With a weak but clear breath, he used his last bit of strength to sign and add his thumbprint to the power of attorney for his daughter, as Kang Mu watched in helpless rage. Kang Mu's plan completely collapsed. Although he made a last-ditch effort with a press conference full of slanderous accusations, Soyeon and Minjun appeared with Chairman Yoon to expose all the lies. With confirmation from the reputable billionaire and an investment of $50 million, the corporation regained the public's trust. Kang Mu was finally arrested by the investigation team for stock price manipulation, bringing his tyrannical reign to an end. A week later, after the storm had passed, they celebrated together atop the brilliantly lit Lot Tower. Amidst the gentle night breeze, Minjun finally mustered the courage to confess his feelings. He admitted that ever since meeting her on Bukhan Mountain, he had vowed to risk his life, to protect her, not just for his job, but because she was the woman he loved. Overcome with emotion, Soyeon threw herself into his arms, calling him a fool for hiding his feelings for so long. They embraced under the night sky, feeling the beat of two hearts that now truly belonged to each other. 1 year passed. The industrial park project was a resounding success, taking the corporation to new heights. The villain was paying for his crimes behind bars, while Mina was now quietly working to atone for her mistakes. Minjun had become a talented vice chairman, owning a luxury apartment overlooking the Han River where his parents could come to visit. On New Year's Eve, amidst the magnificent fireworks display from Jamsil, Minjun gave Soyeon a passionate kiss and a New Year's greeting for his future wife. The chance encounter on the mountaintop years ago had now blossomed into an eternal love, proving that those with sincere hearts will eventually find the happiness they deserve.